The full destructive force of the bomb cyclone as it wreaks carnage. You could
For the next 2 nights, due to the freezing temperatures, we will be getting into the 20s.
And now the state is trying to determine the source of these bizarre bubbles along the shoreline.
At first, he wondered if it was a rocket launch, but the movement didn't match. It's trailing along the street as it crosses a wooden bridge and then disappears.
Across the United States, the ground is shifting, the skies are changing, and nature is behaving in ways that feel impossible to ignore. Regions once thought untouchable are freezing solid. Fertile land collapses overnight. Rivers begin to move from below. Dust rises like walls. Animals act in eerie unison, and hidden structures beneath the earth return to the conversation. These are not isolated moments. They are converging into a pattern that feels deliberate and urgent. History shows that warnings often appear before major turning points. The question is not what is happening, but whether anyone is ready to listen. If you feel something is changing too, like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. The cold did not arrive politely. It came like a verdict. A cold front quickly swept across the southern United States, causing temperatures to plummet rapidly, far exceeding the annual average. It dropped so low and so fast that things couldn't react in time. It didn't come and go quickly, but lingered, day after day, making everything around it worse. Power grids strained and then failed. Entire communities went dark as heaters went silent, and homes lost their last line of defense against the creeping freeze. Roads glazed over, pipes cracked. The South, long accustomed to mild winters and easy assumptions, found itself unprepared for a cold that did not retreat with sunrise. The air itself seemed heavier, sharper, almost intentional in its persistence. Then came the images no one expected to see. Iguanas, once motionless fixtures of warm trees and sunlit branches, began to fall. Not fleeing, not fighting, simply dropping. Their bodies stiffened by temperatures their biology was never designed to endure. They became symbols of how quickly life can be overpowered when conditions shift without warning. Trees turned into traps. Gravity finished what the cold had already decided. This was not death in motion. It was life, paused mid-breath. Emergency alerts multiplied. Freeze warnings stretched across maps that had rarely carried such colors. What was once considered unthinkable now appeared routine on screens, even as it felt anything but routine on the ground. The cold lingered long enough to erase doubt, long enough to force a reckoning with how fragile modern systems become when nature stops cooperating. Something even more alarming is happening besides the dropping temperatures. Wildlife is leaving, disappearing from daily life. The streets, contrary to their usual bustling pace, are instead eerily silent. The silence is frightening. In that silence, people are left with the cold air and the howling wind. Scripture captures this moment with chilling precision. By the breath of God, ice is formed. Job 37:10. Not shouted, not forced, simply breathed. And in that breath, the world changes state. Water hardens. Motion slows. Strength yields. Life is not destroyed in spectacle, but subdued in an instant. What makes this event impossible to ignore is not its severity, but its significance. It completely changed people's beliefs and perceptions, forcing us to reevaluate rules we had previously considered unshakable truths. This event didn't bring about the usual chaos we encounter, but rather a reversal of order. It served as a reminder to each of us that no stability is permanent and that things can change at any time. The cold came quickly and deepened, but it didn't destroy everything swiftly. It crept in slowly. Instead, it created something far more unimaginable than destruction. The question that arises in everyone's mind is whether this event is normal or abnormal. It is an early warning to everyone. Humanity has placed too much faith in the inherent normalcy of everyday life, and paid little attention to how quickly it can be taken away. Florida did not expect this kind of silence. The cold arrived without hesitation, rolling in like an invading force that ignored geography, reputation, and decades of confidence. Fields that once symbolized abundance hardened overnight, and warmth became a memory rather than a resource. This was not a routine frost or a passing inconvenience. It was a sustained assault that pressed down hour after hour, night after night, until the land itself seemed to surrender. Agriculture felt the impact first, and felt it deepest. Strawberry and blueberry fields that had promised full harvests collapsed into loss before markets ever opened. Blossoms darkened, fruit froze in place, and entire seasons vanished in a matter of hours. Citrus trees, long treated as icons of resilience, stood locked in ice, their fruit compromised and their future uncertain. Vegetables followed the same fate, leaves burned, stems weakened, growth arrested before it could resume. Farmers fought back with the only tools available, pushing irrigation systems through the night in a desperate attempt to hold the temperature just high enough to survive. Water sprayed continuously, forming thick shells of ice around plants as fuel burned and pumps strained. Every hour of protection came with a price, and every sunrise revealed how little control those efforts truly offered. Costs climbed rapidly, while certainty slipped further away. As the freeze lingered, operations began to shut down. Packing houses went quiet. Seasonal workers were sent home with no timeline for return. Trucks that should have been moving produce instead sat idle, waiting for harvests that would never come. The damage extended beyond individual farms, spreading outward into communities built around seasonal labor, local supply chains, and the assumption that winter would always be manageable. The shock was not only financial, it was psychological. Florida had been treated as a safeguard, a reliable source of winter produce when other regions lay dormant. That belief fractured under ice. Buyers scrambled. Imports increased. Prices shifted. Confidence wavered. What had been considered a stable pillar of agricultural planning now looked fragile, exposed to forces once thought unlikely to reach this far south. What made the event truly unsettling was not its intensity alone, but its timing and persistence. The cold did not retreat after a single night. It returned repeatedly, compounding damage and exhausting every remaining defense. Even after the ice melted, uncertainty remained. Many forms of plant injury reveal themselves slowly, days or weeks later, meaning losses continued to surface long after temperatures rose. This air mass doesn't flaunt its destructive power to draw worldwide attention. Instead, it's a gradual drain. It infiltrates slowly, dismantling the assumptions that have guided farming, cultivation, and investment for generations. The land doesn't collapse and disappear all at once. It collapses silently, beneath the layer of ice that covers it. In these moments, history is brought closer. The fertile, vibrant land becomes harsh. The cold in Florida is no accident. A place everyone thought was safely protected is now more vulnerable than ever. This reminds us that security built on established patterns can be easily shattered when those patterns change. The big question is not whether agriculture can recover, but what has changed. A region once considered stable has been brought down by a single event. The damage extends beyond crops, it impacts confidence, and people are questioning how many other things stand on such fragile, crumbling foundations. Don't forget to like if you recognize this happening elsewhere. The sky did not warn anyone. It simply disappeared. What had been open air collapsed into a moving wall as powerful winds tore across parched land, pulling the earth itself into motion. Dust did not rise gently. It was ripped upward, twisted, and compacted into towering columns that advanced with purpose. In seconds, daylight lost its color. Blue vanished. Distance vanished. The horizon folded inward until the world shrank to a suffocating brown-gray haze. This was not ordinary wind. It was pressure made visible, Years of dryness lay waiting just beneath the surface, and when the atmosphere aligned, the ground responded instantly. Soil that once held crops loosened its grip, surrendering to gusts strong enough to lift memory and history into the air. The land did not resist. It rose. Roads became traps. Drivers entered clear stretches of highway, only to be swallowed moments later by zero visibility, with no warning and no time to react. Neighborhoods watched the dust approach like an incoming tide, darkening the sky, blotting out the sun, and turning familiar streets into scenes of disorientation and panic. Breathing grew difficult. Sound dulled. The air itself felt hostile, thick with particles that should never have left the ground. What made the event unsettling was its scale and cohesion. This was not scattered debris or localized turbulence. It moved as a system. A coordinated surge driven by prolonged drought colliding with unusually strong wind patterns, creating a phenomenon that felt less accidental and more inevitable. The longer the land stayed dry, the more fuel it stored. When release came, it came all at once. For many, the images triggered an uncomfortable sense of recognition. This was not new. This had happened before. The towering dust columns echoed the darkest chapters of American history, when fertile plains failed, skies turned black at noon, and entire regions were forced to reckon with the consequences of exhausted land. The Dust Bowl was not remembered as a storm, but as a warning written across generations. What is different now is the speed, the compression, the way extremes no longer unfold slowly, but arrive fully formed. One moment calm, the next, chaos, suspended in the air. The dust did not just obscure vision, it erased the illusion of stability, reminding anyone watching that productivity depends on balance, and balance can break. Scripture frames this reality with unsettling clarity. He turns a fruitful land into a desert because of the wickedness of those who dwell in it. Psalm 107-34. Not as metaphor, as sequence. When land is pushed beyond its limits, it responds. Dry ground lifts. Wind answers. Prosperity thins into particles carried wherever the air decides. This devastation is not from fire or flood. It is the silent stripping away of what the earth once held everything together. The fields are not cleared of burnt ashes. They become empty. The earth does not crack open. It simply softens and disappears. What is swept up into the sky is not just dust. It is vulnerability being swept away. No conclusions can be drawn from these events. They raise the question, how long can the earth withstand the pressure before reacting? Can we still place our trust in things considered solid? Eventually, the dust settled, and the sky returned to its pre-event state. But something had subtly changed. Perception and memory wavered. A sense of unease permeated the earth. It was no longer as it once was, now itself under observation. And especially when the wind and the earth harmonized, the answer might come more quickly. The river did not flood. It whispered, then began to boil. What had always been calm water suddenly lost its stillness as bubbles surged upward from the depths, breaking the surface again and again in restless bursts. There was no storm overhead, no quake beneath, no machinery at work along the banks, yet the water moved as if something below had awakened, pressing upward with steady insistence. The surface no longer reflected the sky. It trembled. The phenomenon did not fade after a few moments. It lingered. Hours passed, then days. Bubbles continued to rise in clusters, spreading across sections of the river that had never behaved this way before. Residents gathered along the banks, watching familiar currents behave like something foreign. The unease came not from violence, but from persistence. Whatever was happening did not seem accidental, and it did not seem finished. Authorities searched for explanations that could restore calm. Gas leaks were mentioned. Aging pipelines were suspected. Submerged infrastructure failures were added to the list. Each theory sounded reasonable on its own, yet none fully accounted for the scale, consistency, or location of the bubbling. No construction had taken place. No recent disaster had disturbed the area. The river had simply changed its behavior without permission or announcement. As speculation grew, so did discomfort. Water has always been a symbol of surface truth, revealing only what it allows to be seen. Now, it appeared to be speaking from below, breaking that unspoken agreement. The bubbles felt less like a spill and more like a signal, rising from depths that people rarely consider and almost never monitor. Attention shifted away from the surface and toward what lay hidden beneath layers of sediment and time. What unsettled observers most was not the motion itself, but the implication. Rivers do not move this way unless pressure is involved. Something had built up below, unseen and ignored, until release became unavoidable. Whether gas, decay, or disturbance, the source remained out of sight, forcing the imagination to fill the gap. The mind tends to fear what it cannot map, and this river refused to explain itself. Silence settled around the site, broken only by the soft, relentless sound of bubbles reaching air and collapsing. Wildlife avoided the area. People stepped back, instinctively. The water no longer felt passive. It felt active, responsive, almost intentional. Even when experts spoke, their words carried uncertainty, and uncertainty travels faster than facts. History offers a quiet pattern. When things long hidden begin to surface, they rarely do so gently. Pressure accumulates invisibly, often dismissed because it cannot be measured easily or seen clearly. Then one day, the surface breaks. Not violently enough to destroy everything, but noticeably enough to force attention. The river did not explode. It insisted. The question gradually shifted. It was no longer just about environmental safety or the integrity of the infrastructure. It emphasized timing. Why this sensitive time, and not another? Why here and not somewhere else? And finally, why was it not warned about beforehand, but occurred so unexpectedly? The bubbling water served as a message, demanding explanation rather than mere repairs. The footage spread rapidly on social media, and the bubbling river, no longer hidden, was quickly exposed. It became a symbol of unease everywhere. Everyone felt that unease, a feeling of unease about something about to be revealed, no longer buried or hidden. After a while, the bubbles stopped and disappeared from the surface of the river. The water returned to its former calm state. But what it conveyed to everyone would certainly never fade away, like its arrival and departure. It planted in people's minds the message that something was silently accumulating, waiting for its turn to manifest. Don't leave, wait for the next event, which will bring an even more indescribable feeling. The animals did not scatter. They assembled. Without warning, a herd gathered into a tight formation and began to move in flawless circles, tracing the same path again and again with unsettling precision. There was no rush, no stampede, no visible distress. The motion was calm, deliberate, and eerily synchronized, as if every animal had received the same instruction at the same moment. Minutes passed, and the pattern held. Each step landed where another had stepped before, creating a living loop that refused to break. Observers watched in disbelief, waiting for chaos that never came. The herd did not panic. It did not hesitate. It continued, rotating as one body, bound by an order no human voice had given. What made the scene disturbing was not movement, but control. There were no storms rolling in, no predators nearby, no explosions, sirens, or sudden disruptions to explain such behavior. The air was still, the ground unchanged. Nothing in the environment suggested urgency, yet the animals moved as though responding to something real, something present, something unseen. Attempts to explain the behavior arrived quickly, but none settled the unease. Some pointed to herd instinct, suggesting that one animal's movement triggered another until the pattern locked in. Others spoke of defensive responses or learned behaviors. Yet even these explanations faltered when faced with the uniformity. This was not a loose drift or chaotic milling. It was geometry in motion, repeated without deviation. The longer it continued, the more unnatural it felt. Living creatures rarely move with such mathematical consistency unless guided by strong external cues. Yet no cue could be identified, no sound registered, no visual stimulus appeared. The herd behaved as though reacting to a signal beyond human perception, one that did not announce itself, but demanded obedience. Footage of the event spread quickly, and reactions followed a familiar pattern. Fascination gave way to discomfort. Discomfort turned into speculation. Viewers sensed that what unsettled them was not the animals, but the implication. If creatures so closely tied to instinct and environment were responding to something unnoticed, what did that suggest about the limits of human awareness? Animals have long been observed reacting before earthquakes, storms, and environmental shifts. They sense vibrations, pressures, and frequencies that escape human detection. But this scene felt different. There was no imminent disaster to validate the movement, no aftermath to explain it. Only the action itself, complete and unexplained. The circles eventually slowed. The herd dispersed. Life appeared to return to normal, yet the image lingered. The calm precision, the absence of fear, the sense of coordination without command. Once witnessed, it could not be unseen. What prompted much thought among observers was the synchronized movement of the animals. Such a uniform scale suggests a systematic arrangement, not randomness. It indicates a reaction, not chance. The fragility is more apparent than ever in this moment. Science offers an explanation, but it's not yet convincing. The explanation lags behind observation. A pervasive sense of unease prevails. The scene forces one to ask a question that is difficult to dismiss easily. Is this simply the instinct of ordinary animals, or a reaction to something else? Something that has been at work? Something that has been affecting the world in ways yet unknown? The animals simply acted without responding. They never did. They simply moved, as if aware of something the other animals didn't, leaving behind an indescribable image etched into the mind of anyone who observed them. They were never meant to be discussed. They were meant to be survived. After every major disaster, fragments of information resurface that feel strangely out of place, like debris rising after a collapse. Old documents, forgotten reports, unexplained budget gaps begin circulating again, all pointing toward one unsettling idea. Beneath the ground we walk on, there may exist a parallel world built in silence. Whispers of vast tunnel networks stretch across regions, connecting locations that were never publicly acknowledged as linked. These are not shallow utility passages or abandoned subways, but deep, reinforced corridors designed to endure pressure, time, and catastrophe. The deeper the questions go, the more resistance they meet, as if the Earth itself is trained to keep these secrets buried. What intensifies suspicion is the money. Financial audits reveal enormous sums that vanish without clear destination, written off as adjustments or classified infrastructure. Numbers too large to dismiss quietly, yet too complex to trace cleanly. When placed beside rumors of underground construction, coincidence begins to lose credibility. Some theories claim these hidden structures are not relics of the past, but preparations for the future. Emergency shelters built not for the public, but for a select few. Places where life continues uninterrupted while chaos unfolds above, separated by layers of concrete, steel, and privilege.